When I was 19 years old, I opened a bar in Jerusalem called the Mad Hatter. It was hugely successful. I've never made more money in my life than I did when I was 19, 20, 21 when I had the bar. It came with a certain lifestyle. You know, I lived hard. At the same time, I was going to film school in Tel Aviv to study how to be Francis Ford Coppola. So I studied all day and I worked in the bar all night. I would start the evening by drinking espressos. I would stay awake and I would then drink cognacs to mellow out the caffeine. And that's how it went for many years. And, you know, I had a lot of fun. But at some point, after about 3 years, I needed a change. It was too much for me. I didn't sleep at all. I was either in the bar or at film school. A friend of mine came into the bar one day, friend customer, and he said that he works as a soundman. You know, the guys who hold the boom to record the sound when you're recording news. So that was his job. And he worked for foreign networks in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is always in the news. It still is. And he worked there, and he said that he makes a lot of money, and it's really easy, and I go to film school, so I know how to record sound, which I honestly didn't. The very next day, I didn't go to film school, and I went to this building called JCS, where all the networks are based in Jerusalem, every single one of them. And I decided it was a 7-story building, and I decided to start at the bottom, so I pressed 1 on the elevator and got out of the elevator and walked straight into the BBC office. And I said very innocently, "Hey, do you guys need a soundman?" And they said, "Yes, can you start tomorrow?" So I was hired. I'm not very good soundman. Before we were testing sound here and people were asking me if there was an echo and I had no idea. But I am a very good news producer. It's a talent that I have. The news producer is the guy who does the logistics and finds the story and takes care of the correspondent, and I had a knack for that. So after about 2 months, everyone agreed that my skills were much better used at producing than recording sound, and then maybe the newscast would actually have sound. So that's what I did. Shortly after that, the war in Chechnya broke out. And headquarters in London wanted volunteers to go and cover the war. And I raised my hand and jumped up and down and said, "Me, me, me." And so I went to Chechnya, and I found myself in Grozny while Russian MiG-21s were carpet bombing the city. I was about 22 years old. And I don't know if anyone here has been in a city that's being carpet bombed, but there's a very distinct smell of high octane gasoline and gunpowder. And I got addicted. I didn't get addicted to that smell particularly, although I have to say that I enjoy that smell. I got addicted to adrenaline. I became an adrenaline junkie. I wanted that high of adrenaline. It starts at the back of your throat. I'm sure that many of you have experienced it. You feel kind of like a metallic taste, and then there's a rush, and then you have a clarity of thought that you've never had before, and you're absolutely convinced that you can do anything in the world. You are the smartest person in the room. You are the strongest person in the room. And that was the most incredible high. I came back from Chechnya and immediately started looking for my next fix. I wanted to go back to a war. I wanted to tell that story again. I also realized that this was my vocation. This is what I love to do. This is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I wanted to tell stories, not like Francis, but stories about war. So that's what I did. I volunteered for the next war, and the next one after that, and the next one after that. I was in Somalia during the invasion of the Americans. I was in Congo. I was in South Sudan during the worst of the wars. I was in Liberia. I was in Sierra Leone. I was in the Rwandan genocide. So I covered wars. That's what I did. I was a war correspondent for many years. And I needed to feed my addiction. Luckily, the 90s were a good time for adrenaline junkies because there was a lot of wars. So I could constantly be going back to war. And when I was at home, I would, after about 4 days, would lose myself and not be able to understand where I was. And I would call my headquarters and I would say, "Hey, so where can I go next?" And that's how I lived my life. That also comes with a certain lifestyle. There's a price to pay here. Of course, family is out of the question because I was living out of the bag and I was jumping on planes the whole time to go somewhere else to cover another story. But more than that, when you tell a story about war, what you're really telling a story about is the people that are left behind. You're telling a story of grief. And that was something that I experienced every day. I saw the worst of humanity. I saw the very best of humanity as well. But it took its toll. And I was in grave danger every single day. I saw other journalist friends get killed in action. We were constantly in danger. As a young person, you don't quite realize that danger. Now, if I think back of the stuff that I did, I get scared now of the stuff that I did in the past. But it was like really a grave danger, and we knew that we were playing with the odds. Every time that we went out to get a story, we didn't know if we were going to come back. At some point, I was hired by Reuters Television. It's a wire service. And the difference between a wire service and a network is that a wire service, you have to be at the front lines all the time. I was based in Nairobi at the time. I went to a bar with two friends, very close friends, Miles and Miguel. And we sat in this bar called Gypsies in Nairobi, a very, very nice bar. If you ever go, it still exists. Please check it out. It's in Westlands. And we were, drinking white cups and white cup beers, and we were flirting with the bartenderess. But we were also talking about the odds of us not coming back. So we decided to have a pact. We decided that we're all going to get out. We're going to get out of this business. We're going to find a different kind of job, maybe a desk job, a journalist desk job. Maybe we could do something else, but we needed to get out, and we gave ourselves a year. We said within a year, all three of us will be out. And so that's the pact that we made. Myself, Miles, and Miguel. 2 months later, Miles was killed in the war in Sierra Leone, in the Civil War. And 4 months after that, Miguel was shot in the head in the car that I was sitting with him in the car. I jumped into the jungle and escaped, but Miguel, my friend, was killed. And so that should have been the last straw. That should have been what made me kind of like finally kick this addiction and leave. But it didn't quite happen that way. I still stayed. I didn't know how to get out. And then at some point there was the Asian tsunami. 250,000 people died in that tsunami. And I arrived about 14 hours after the wave. And all I saw everywhere around me was grief. What had happened was that my mom passed away that year. And so every single grief that I saw was suddenly my grief. And then that was it. That's when I could kick it. That's when I decided that I would leave. I went on a long holiday. I applied on a whim to the United Nations, thinking that they would never, ever hire me, because why would they? But they hired me. And now I live in the suburbs of New York. I have two small kids. One is 6, Cosmo, and another is 11, Adrian. I love being a father with the same passion that I had for being a journalist. It's my favorite thing. I love living in the suburbs. I love having barbecues on the weekend. I have a stressful job. I create campaigns in the UN. I love my job, and sometimes it's stressful, but no one ever shoots at me. It's a huge bonus. And that's where I am today. I've managed to kick the addiction. I've managed to move away from being an adrenaline junkie to having a life that I absolutely love, and I have absolutely no regrets. But you know what they say about addicts. Thank you.